These are select fragmentary excerpts from the unfinished documentary, Fire of Subcreation, of Song and Spear. A tale of subcreation leading to subcreation. How a video game set in Tolkien's world inspired a song, and how a song inspired the forging of a spear. I would draw some of the great tales in fullness and leave only many placed in the scheme and sketched. The cycle should be linked to a majestic whole, and yet leave scope for other minds and hands, wielding paint and music and drama. And why not the hammer and forge as well? It all started with a scholarly quest I had received from a fair elf named Nithranwen in an elven refuge in the Blue Mountains. Ever seeking to improve my skills as a scholar, I accepted the quest to compose a ballad about Aiglos, the famed lost spear of Gil-galad. She advised me to find as many cryptic texts and even fragmentary lost stanzas relating to the spear of Gil-galad. She sent me off on this quest only with this advice. Much that happens in the world is written, but the turning of the seasons and the passage of time can sweep away all records, till all that remains are faded parchments. Thoughtful travelers sometimes come across these, picking them up to wonder at their meanings. Through my own studies, I have found references to Aiglos in cryptic texts found throughout Breland and the Lone Lands. Well, as I set off on my quest to find lost stanzas about the spear Aiglos, questions naturally began to form in my mind. What happened to the spear after the Battle of Gil-galad? Was it in fact broken and truly lost? What was its design and power? Could it ever be found, or possibly reforged? As I discovered a line here, a rumor there, I considered also the fragments of songs already passed down.
His sword was long, his lance was keen, his shining helm afar was seen. The countless stars of heaven's field were mirrored in his silver shield.
Words and images invoked such wonder in my mind. A fire began to burn in my heart that would carry my quest onward until I had indeed forged a Ballad of Aiglos. Each scrap of text I found on second-age trinkets brought me closer to penning a song I hoped would invoke the same wonder in others that I had felt on my journey. In reality, it was this quest that my character Galen here had received in the secondary subcreation of Lord of the Rings Online, a video game, that set me wondering what would this Ballad of Aiglos sound like if I actually did compose it and record it. Well, I set off on the same quest as my character in the game, to find every fragment about Gil-galad and Aiglos that survived in the writings of J.r.r. Tolkien. After much reading and wondering, I composed the lyrics from a perspective of a sentient spear. Another subcreative fire had been sparked by the wonder of a curious quest bestowed inside a video game, inspired itself from the fragments of Tolkien's writing. And then the song was complete.
In the hands of the last High King, among the exiles of Middle-earth, from the sea to the mountains I carved a free path after the war of wrath. The first to distrust the deceiver of man, wise master of radiant star, alone of the elder, forbid and atar, wise king, rules not thy grip on me, for my blade is purer than snowfall, my sling is keener than ice, hold me fast among thine enemies, for I am the spear, yes I am the spear, cold Aiglos. I saw Westerners fall beneath the wave, and the last of the faithful set forth. With Gondor and Arnor I joined in the war, against the alliance of elves and men. I bring cold death to walk and goblin, from the gathering at Oromë. We saw victory's ransom on the battle plain, 7 years of siege and dark tower, for my blade more pure than snowfall, and my sting is keener than ice, hold me fast among thine enemies, for I am the spear, yes I am the spear, cold Aiglos. In the hands of the last High King, among brave dwarves, elves and men, though against me none could withstand, I fell from Gil-galad's hand. My blade was brighter than snowfall, and my sting was keener than ice, hold me fast among his enemies, for I am the spear, yes I am the spear, cold Aiglos.
Not long after the song was complete and recorded, a chance meeting led me to the wondrous crafting of bladesmith David Delagardelle. David will now tell some of that story with a special greeting and additional Tolkien-inspired sub-creations. May it invoke wonder in us all.
My name is David Delagardelle. I am the sole owner and operator of Cedarlore Forge. I craft mythopoetic, hand-forged, history and mythology-inspired swords and artifacts and fine art for folks around the world, such as my good friend John DiBartolo. When I'm not making spears for John, I make stuff like this, which is a sword I made for Marvel Comics' 2011 movie Thor. And when I'm not making goofy, insane stuff like that, I'm making more subtle, hopefully Tolkien-inspired elven swords, pattern welded, bronze, engraved, hardwood carved, all that nonsense. Swords for other kind folks around the world. Thanks to the internet, I have the blessing and opportunity of meeting folks like John, Tolkien fans, history fans far and wide, who give me the awesome opportunity of bringing artifacts, weapons to life from their favorite books and literature in history, but primarily Tolkien, as you all know, and I'm sure love as well. Now John is speaking and sharing about Aiglos and the spear that I made him, and the song that he wrote, is what I understand. And the story behind that is quite fun and long. I've been doing this craft since I was about 14, and I'm 28 now, I think. I'll have to ask my wife, I'm not sure. But John has been a very kind encourager and supporter of my work for years now. He found me and my good friend when we first started on the craft, and the first thing right off the bat he asked is, could you guys craft Aiglos from me? Now, Aiglos or Aiglos, I'm not sure how you say it. You guys all know, you're the scholars, not me. But anyway, he asked us to craft the spear of Gil-galad, and at the time I was thrilled, really appreciated that this really cool, encouraging, rambunctious guy online was so supportive of our work, but I didn't quite have the skills, me and my buddy who I was working with at the time. We didn't know how to forge spears. So I told him yes, but it's gonna take me a while. Fast forward about 5, 6, maybe 7 years later, I finally got around to crafting the spear of Gil-galad for my good friend John. So he'll be sharing more about it with you all, and the song that he wrote as well, I'm sure. But what I want to give you all a glimpse of right now is a glimpse into how I crafted the spear. Now, unfortunately, I don't have tons of photos and videos of how I crafted John's particular spear. I'll have some, but not everything. But what I do have is other videos and photos of other spears that I crafted, which ironically are directly Tolkien-inspired spears. One of which you'll get to see is the spear of Oromë, highly inspired by the Silmarillion and his character, and I also just finished a spear inspired by the Dunedain that a ranger would carry. So I never thought this would become my full-time craft, but the Lord's led me on a fun and crazy ride throughout my life, and I'm also blessed with an incredible wife who allows me to do such a weird job. Yeah, so enjoy this glimpse into how I do my work, how I craft a Middle-earth Tolkien-inspired spear, and I hope you enjoy. God bless. Before I light the fire of my forge to shape steel on anvil, I let my imagination run loose with pen and paper. I dive deep into historical research as well. Even though Aiglos is a mythical spear from Tolkien's Legendarium, I like to still pull ideas from historical sources, the same way that Tolkien did when crafting his own world and languages. I also choose to take direct inspiration from Tolkien's own illustrations and doodles. Some of my favorite art from the professor was sketches he did on notes and envelopes, including the heraldry of Gil-galad himself. After studying the professor's art, I begin to sketch my own designs, doing my best to follow in the footsteps of the patterns and the lines that he developed. Reading Tolkien's description of Gil-galad himself evokes an image of a strong warrior king, defined by the elements of ice and snow. I try my best to capture these elements in my art and end up with a final design of the legendary spear. Now that I have my spear fully designed, I'm ready to bring it to life with steel and iron in my forge. At the time when I brought the spear to life, I was working in my old smithy, using the simple tools of a propane forge to heat up the steel, and a 200-year-old German anvil on which I pound out the blade with precise and rhythmic blows of the hammer. I chose to forge the blade out of 1075 high-carbon tool steel, and I forged the socket out of a separate piece of 100-year-old wrought iron. Once I have my blade and socket forged to shape, I grind the blade to a clean and perfectly straight geometry. Once I'm done with the grinding, I'm then ready for heat treatment. This is the most crucial point at which the blade truly becomes alive. By heating it up to 1500 degrees and then quenching in oil, I make the blade very hard so that it can retain a functional cutting edge. Finally, I do one last pass on the grinder to remove any fiery scale left from quenching, and then I move on to hand polishing with sandpaper and stones before I temper the blade. Tempering is the process of heating up the steel to a lower temperature, in this case between 400 to 500 degrees. By doing so, I make the blade springy and tough so that it won't snap under heavy usage. By doing this, I also achieve an icy cold blue color on the entire surface of the steel. Achieving this blue color also allows me to engrave the blade. I add designs from Tolkien's own artwork with a rotary tool and find a snowflake design he did and engrave it directly onto the blade. At long last, the spear is finished, and I'm ready to share it with the world. I was happy with the finished product and shipped it off to John, its proud new owner. But I hadn't yet crafted all of the Tolkien-inspired spears that I had dreamt of forging for years. My next and far more ambitious project was forging to life the spear of the hunter Valar Oromë. Oromë has always been my favorite character in Tolkien's world, and I was desperate to take on the task of shaping a spear that Melkor himself would fear. I based my sketches and designs for the spear highly off of historical original artifacts, mainly Celtic, Latin, and Iron Age artifacts, all throughout the Bronze Age and beyond. I mixed and melded these different designs into what I thought would be befitting of the hunter Valar, and even took direct inspiration from Celtic early art in the ornamentation, decoration, and carving that I would add onto the haft of the spear and the sheath. I forged the blade out of meteorite with the help of my good friend, John Page. John is a skillful blacksmith and bladesmith, and we fused different layers of high-carbon tool steel and the meteorite which he provided into the blade that we were extremely proud of. The process of forge welding and fusing together these different layers of meteorite, high-carbon steel, and wrought iron was an extremely time-consuming and labor-intensive process. It required massively high heats in my propane forge in order for the layers to successfully fuse together. With John's help, however, I was thankful that we were able to succeed in this endeavor, and once all the layers were won, I moved on to the process of grinding the geometry to a perfect and straight shape. Once I achieved the geometry that I was aiming for, I was then able to move on to heat treatment and final polishing. With the blade polished, I was also able to etch it in acid to reveal the folded layers of meteorite and carbon steel. I envisioned the spear to symbolically represent the midnight hunt, so I wanted it to have decorations that evoked feelings and imageries of stars and planets swirling like flowing gold in the vast midnight sky. I did this by adding engraved bronze pins through the blade that feature spiral Iron Age ornamentation, as well as constellation-like engravings on the blade and socket. I chose to craft the long wooden haft out of Brazilian oak, which I blackened with coal powder and carved with galaxy-shaped motifs. However, I wasn't finished with Oromë's spear alone. I had one more Tolkien-inspired spear in my mind that I had to forge to life. And so, with the help of a few of my really close craftsman friends, we set out to craft a true Dunedain war spear. Nelnacht the Thornbite, I named it. The blade was forged out of 1075 tool steel and 200-plus-year-old ship anchor chain off of a ship from Great Britain. I engraved the blade with thistle and thorn motifs to reflect the wild nature of the ranger who would have carried it, and I carved a green hickory haft to give it a deadly strength and reach. In the end, I hope that all three of these spears faithfully capture the spirit and essence of the beautifully woven world that Tolkien forged to life with his own words. And in doing so, I hope that my work shares the same hope and fiercely bright love for this good green earth that the crafter of the cosmos has blessed us all to live in, no matter how dark the valleys or mighty the foes. God bless, and thanks for watching.